Imagine the sound of your own voice echoing in a quiet room. The way each word leaves your lips is like a brushstroke on the canvas of life. You shape the mood, the direction, and the very fabric of your relationships with every syllable. Words are not just sounds strung together. They are signals, energy, and influence. They can make someone feel safe or vulnerable, valued or dismissed. Right now, as you listen, you know deep down that communication is more than conversation. It is the current that carries your story forward, shaping how others see you and, more importantly, how you see yourself. You walk through your day, leaving trails of conversation behind you. A smile paired with a greeting, a message typed hastily to a friend, a pause before saying something difficult to a colleague. Each of these small moments seems ordinary, but together, they form the architecture of your life. You may not always notice it, but the way you speak and the way you listen becomes the invisible foundation upon which trust, success, and love are built. That is why words matter more than you think, and why mastering communication can change not only how others experience you, but also how you experience yourself. I remember a time early in my career when I avoided speaking up in meetings. I had ideas swirling in my head, but the fear of saying something wrong silenced me. Each week, I watched others confidently share, and it seemed like their voices carved opportunities that passed me by. One afternoon, my manager asked me directly for input, and instead of shrinking away, I forced myself to answer. My words tumbled out awkwardly, but the room paused. People leaned in, and for the first time, I realized that the very act of sharing had value, even if imperfect. That single moment taught me something you might recognize in your own journey. Silence protects you in the short term, but it steals your chance to be seen. Think about this. How often have you left a conversation wishing you had said something differently, or wishing you had listened more closely? These regrets reveal the weight communication carries. They show you that words are not fleeting. They linger. They shape impressions, determine opportunities, and influence the health of every relationship. The people around you, friends, family, co-workers, are constantly forming judgments, not only from what you say, but from how you say it. Your tone, your timing, your presence, they all matter. One of the most transformative shifts you can make is recognizing that every interaction is a choice. You can choose to speak in a way that uplifts or in a way that wounds. You can choose to listen with your whole attention or let your thoughts drift and miss the moment. This choice exists in every greeting, every disagreement, every confession of love, every workplace conversation. The magic lies in your awareness that communication is never neutral. It is either building or eroding connection. Picture yourself at a family gathering. A relative tells you about something painful in their life. If you nod half-heartedly, distracted by your phone, the moment passes. But the message you've sent is clear. They are not worth your full attention. Now imagine putting the phone aside, meeting their eyes, leaning in, and saying, "That must be hard. Tell me more." The difference between those two responses is the difference between distance and closeness, between indifference and intimacy. And the truth is, you hold that power in every interaction. Of course, words don't exist only in personal spaces. In your professional life, communication can determine whether you're overlooked or recognized. I once worked with someone who didn't always have the most innovative ideas, but the way she presented them, with clarity, with confidence, with conviction, made people pay attention. Others in the room, perhaps more talented, stayed quiet or fumbled through explanations. Guess whose projects got approved? It wasn't the silent thinkers. It was the one who spoke with authority. That may feel unfair, but it is reality. People respond to confidence even before they analyze content. And you too can cultivate that kind of presence by practicing how you use your voice and how you structure your thoughts. It's easy to assume communication is instinctive, that because you can talk, you must be communicating effectively. But real mastery is intentional. It requires you to pause, to consider, to craft not only the message but the experience you create for the other person. Think of conversations as bridges. Every word you choose is a plank. Build carefully, and the bridge holds weight. People cross over, bringing trust, vulnerability, and collaboration. Build carelessly, and cracks form. Soon, the bridge collapses under the strain of misunderstanding and hurt. There was a time when I thought being articulate was enough. I believed that if I strung sentences together logically, people would naturally understand me. But communication is not a math equation. It is an emotional exchange. If you leave out empathy, warmth, or awareness of the other person's perspective, even the clearest argument can fall flat. I learned this painfully in a friendship that nearly dissolved over a small misunderstanding. I had given an honest opinion, but delivered it bluntly, without considering how it might land. My friend withdrew, hurt by words I never intended to harm. It was only later, after a heartfelt conversation, where I acknowledged her feelings, that we healed. That experience burned into me the lesson you can carry forward. Clarity without compassion can be as damaging as silence. As you step back and reflect, ask yourself, how often are you intentional with your words? Do you think about the energy you want to leave behind after each interaction? Because communication doesn't end when the conversation ends. It lingers in the memory of the person who received it. A kind comment can echo for days. A careless remark can echo for years. There is also the communication you have with yourself, the quiet internal dialogue that shapes your confidence and choices. If you constantly tell yourself, "I'm not good at this," or "No one wants to hear me," those words become chains that restrict you. But if you shift that language, even slightly, to "I am learning," or "I have something worth saying," your entire posture changes. The words you speak to yourself influence the way you show up for others. In this way, communication is not just an outward tool. It is the mirror reflecting your own self-belief. You might be tempted to think that some people are simply born great communicators, blessed with natural charisma, but that is a myth. Communication is a skill, trainable, learnable, and improvable. Consider how musicians practice scales or athletes drill routines. Communication, too, requires deliberate practice, pausing instead of interrupting, choosing curiosity instead of assumption, framing feedback with respect instead of criticism. Each small adjustment compounds into a style of communication that others come to trust, admire, and follow. Pause for a moment and imagine yourself 6 months from now, having practiced these shifts. Picture the way colleagues listen when you speak, the way your partner feels safe to confide, the way friends turn to you for guidance. Imagine the opportunities that open up simply because you have learned to use your words with intention and heart. That future is not distant. It begins with the conversations you have today. Now, let's talk about presence. Presence is not about the volume of your voice or the complexity of your vocabulary. It is about the energy you bring into the space. When you walk into a room and carry yourself with openness, shoulders relaxed, eyes engaged, a genuine smile, you communicate before a single word leaves your mouth. This kind of presence cannot be faked for long. It grows out of self-awareness and authentic intention. When your inner language aligns with your outer expression, people sense integrity, and integrity is magnetic. Think of someone you admire, not because of what they achieved, but because of how they made you feel. Perhaps it was a teacher, a mentor, or even a stranger whose kindness lingered with you. What you remember is not just their words, but the emotional resonance they carried. That resonance comes from deliberate, thoughtful communication. You can cultivate the same by asking yourself, in every exchange, what do I want this person to feel after I speak? There's a practical exercise you can try today. In your next conversation, focus less on what you want to say and more on what you want the other person to feel. Do you want them to feel understood, valued, encouraged? That focus will naturally shape the words you choose, the tone you use, and the attention you give. Over time, this practice transforms your communication from transactional to transformational. Another dimension of communication often overlooked is listening. Not passive listening, but active engagement. When you truly listen, you are communicating respect. You are saying, without words, you matter. And when people feel they matter, they open up. Trust grows, and relationships deepen. Listening is one of the most powerful communication tools you possess. Yet, it is the one most often neglected in a world of distractions. I once had coffee with a friend who was going through a difficult season. My instinct was to jump in with advice, to fill the silence with solutions. But I stopped myself and chose instead to sit quietly, to nod, to reflect back her feelings. At the end of our conversation, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for listening. I feel lighter." She never once mentioned my advice because she didn't need it. What she needed was presence. That day I realized communication is not always about giving more words. Sometimes it is about creating space for others' words to breathe. You will find that when you master both sides, expressing yourself with clarity and listening with empathy, you begin to experience a different level of connection. People trust you more, conflicts resolve more easily, and your influence expands naturally. This is the hidden promise of effective communication. It is not about dominating conversations, but about creating relationships where everyone feels valued. So as you move forward, carry this truth. Your words are not small. They shape your world. They can open doors, heal wounds, inspire courage, and create belonging. Every interaction is an opportunity to plant seeds, seeds of trust, of understanding, of possibility. And when you plant them intentionally, your life blossoms in ways you never imagined. You walk into a crowded room, and before anyone speaks, your senses already begin reading the atmosphere. Shoulders slumped, arms folded, eyes darting away. All of these silent signals tell you more about the people around you than their words ever could. Communication is not limited to the sentences you form. It flows in the spaces between words. It lingers in the tilt of your head, the rhythm of your breath, the way you pause before answering. You may not realize it, but even when you remain silent, you are still speaking. Think of the last time someone gave you a warm, genuine smile. No words were necessary. You immediately felt welcomed, accepted, at ease. Now recall the opposite: a curt nod, an averted gaze, a tapping foot that seemed impatient for you to finish. That unspoken message left you unsettled, maybe even doubting yourself. This is the power of nonverbal communication. It shapes every interaction, often more than the content of speech itself. You are not just heard, you are seen and felt. I remember standing on a stage for one of my earliest presentations. I had rehearsed my lines, perfected my slides, and told myself that clarity of words would win the audience over. But halfway through, I saw blank stares. Their eyes slid toward the exit, their posture slouched with disinterest. My sentences were crisp, yet I was losing them. It hit me later. My body was rigid, my arms crossed tightly across my chest, my voice a monotone drone. My words were fine, but my delivery was shutting people out. That day I learned an unforgettable truth. Your body is always part of the conversation, and if it contradicts your words, your message dissolves. Your posture, your gestures, your tone, they act like highlighters, emphasizing some messages and muting others. When you speak about passion with lifeless hands and an absent gaze, people doubt you. But when you share an idea with an upright posture, steady eye contact, and an energized tone, even skeptics lean in. That is why mastering unspoken signals is as essential as shaping your sentences. Let's consider body language first. An open posture, shoulders back, arms relaxed, feet firmly planted, communicates confidence and approachability. By contrast, crossing your arms tightly or turning slightly away can signal defensiveness or disinterest. It doesn't mean you must stand like a statue. Rather, allow your body to reflect your openness. When you mirror someone's posture naturally, they feel a subconscious sense of rapport. They think, "This person understands me." Simple adjustments like leaning in slightly or nodding at key moments show attentiveness and create safety for deeper dialogue. Then there is eye contact. Too little, and you seem evasive. Too much, and you may come across as intimidating. The sweet spot is steady, respectful, and responsive eye contact. Imagine speaking to a friend and noticing their gaze flick repeatedly to their phone. The conversation feels fractured, doesn't it? Now imagine the same friend locking eyes, listening intently. You feel validated, significant. The truth is, your eyes reveal more than your words ever could. They betray distraction, but they also radiate compassion when fully engaged. Gestures, too, play their part. A hand slicing through the air with sharp motions can intensify conflict, while open-palmed gestures invite collaboration. Watch great speakers, and you'll notice how their hands move in rhythm with their words, not erratic, but purposeful. A raised eyebrow can signal curiosity. A soft smile can disarm tension. A gentle tilt of the head can invite openness. These small, almost invisible details accumulate into the impression people form about you. Tone of voice may be the most underestimated signal of all. Consider how the phrase, "I'm fine," can mean drastically different things, depending on tone. A flat, clipped "I'm fine" may actually scream hurt or anger, while a light, lilting "I'm fine" might communicate genuine contentment. Your voice carries the emotional weight of your message. Speak too quickly, and you may sound anxious. Speak too softly, and your words vanish. Speak with warmth, and your message gains power even before the meaning is processed. There's a story I can't forget about a mentor who once guided me through a conflict at work. Two colleagues had clashed during a meeting, each convinced they were right. The words exchanged were less important than the tones used. One sharp, cutting, dismissive, the other defensive, trembling, wounded. The actual disagreement was about logistics, but what lingered long after was the sting of tone. My mentor explained, "People forget the exact words. They remember how you made them feel." That sentence changed how I approached every conversation afterward. When you combine body language, eye contact, gestures, and tone, you create a full spectrum of unspoken communication. And here's the key. Your nonverbal signals should align with your words. When they match, people trust you. When they conflict, doubt creeps in. Say, "I'm excited about this project," with a monotone voice and slouched shoulders, and no one believes you. Say it with bright eyes, animated hands, and an energetic tone, and suddenly your enthusiasm becomes contagious. Of course, being aware of your own signals is only half the journey. The other half lies in reading the signals of others. Imagine a colleague in a meeting, nodding continuously, but their jaw tight, lips pressed thin. The nod says agreement, but the face says resistance. If you ignore the contradiction, tension festers. But if you pause to ask, "I sense you might have some reservations. Would you like to share?" You give them space to reveal the truth. This skill of noticing micro-expressions and subtle cues allows you to catch misunderstandings before they explode. Cultural context also shapes nonverbal communication. A gesture that feels friendly in one culture might offend in another. A direct gaze in some regions shows respect. In others, it feels confrontational. This is why awareness, humility, and curiosity are crucial. When in doubt, observe first, then mirror respectfully. Nonverbal fluency is not about rigid rules. It is about sensitivity to human variety. Let's bring this closer to your own daily life. Think of a time when someone misunderstood you and you wondered how it happened. Chances are, it wasn't the words alone. It was the way your body and voice shaped the message. Or think of a time you instantly trusted someone new. It was likely their posture, their smile, their attentiveness that gave you comfort before you even processed their words. Nonverbal communication works beneath the surface, forming judgments before the conscious mind catches up. So how do you begin to master this silent language? Start with self-awareness. The next time you enter a conversation, notice your body. Are your arms crossed? Is your tone rushed? Is your gaze wandering? Simply catching yourself in the act allows you to adjust. Then, practice intentionality. If you want someone to feel safe, relax your posture, soften your tone, lean in slightly. If you want to inspire, allow your energy to rise. Let your gestures expand. Let your voice carry conviction. A practical exercise is to record yourself speaking. Watch not only the words, but your entire delivery. Do your hands support your message or distract from it? Does your face reflect the emotion you want to convey? Listening back to your own tone can be uncomfortable, but it is invaluable. It teaches you to align your verbal and nonverbal signals, creating coherence. Another exercise is mindful mirroring. Without exaggeration, reflect the energy of the person you're speaking with. If they are calm and measured, slow your rhythm to match. If they are animated and lively, allow yourself to expand as well. Mirroring builds trust because it tells the other person, we are on the same wavelength. Above all, Remember that unspoken signals are not accessories to communication. They are the core of it. You can transform an ordinary exchange into a meaningful one by aligning your body and voice with your words. You can notice tension in others before it surfaces in conflict. You can create warmth where there might have been distance. Every gesture, every pause, every tone is an opportunity to connect more deeply. When you understand this, communication becomes more than speech. It becomes presence. You no longer rely solely on explanations. You embody your message. People leave your presence not only remembering what you said, but feeling the truth of who you are. And in a world saturated with noise, that kind of authenticity is rare, magnetic, and unforgettable. You sit across from someone you care about, and as they begin to speak, you feel a choice rising inside you. Do you listen only to the words, planning your reply before they finish? Or do you step fully into their experience, imagining what the world looks like through their eyes? This choice, whether to rush toward your own perspective or lean into theirs, is the difference between surface conversation and genuine connection. Empathy is the bridge that transforms communication from transactional to transformational. Without it, words fall flat. With it, words become vessels of healing, trust, and understanding. Think back to a moment when you felt truly understood. Maybe it was a friend who said, "I can see how painful that must be for you." Or a colleague who paused long enough to notice the tension in your shoulders. In that moment, you weren't just heard, you were validated. That feeling stays with you, doesn't it? It becomes a turning point in the relationship. That is the gift of empathy. It creates belonging in a world that often leaves people feeling unseen. I remember a late-night conversation with a college roommate. He had been carrying the weight of anxiety, but hid it under jokes and busy schedules. That night, the mask cracked, and he confessed how overwhelmed he felt. My instinct was to offer quick fixes, study tips, time management strategies, but something stopped me. Instead, I said, "That sounds exhausting. I can't imagine how much energy it must take to hold that inside." His shoulders relaxed, tears welled up, and in that fragile silence, I learned that empathy is not about solving someone's problems. It is about sharing the weight of them. You may not have the answer, but you can offer presence, and presence often matters more than solutions. Empathy begins with curiosity. It is the willingness to pause your assumptions and ask, what might they be feeling right now? This question softens your heart and redirects your focus from judgment to understanding. For example, when a colleague snaps in a meeting, your first impulse might be defensiveness. Why are they attacking me? But if you pause and consider, maybe they're under pressure I don't see, your response shifts. Instead of escalating, you can respond with patience. That small act of reframing prevents unnecessary conflict and often invites honesty from the other person. Yet empathy is not just about the dramatic moments of breakdown or confession. It thrives in the everyday. When your partner shares the details of their day, when your child tells a story that meanders endlessly, when your coworker explains a frustration that seems trivial to you. Each of these is an opportunity to lean in with empathy. You may not think it matters much, but to them, it signals, "I matter to you." There is a profound difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy stands at a distance, offering polite concern. Empathy steps into the circle, sharing the emotion as if it were your own. Imagine a friend grieving. Sympathy says, "I'm sorry for your loss." Empathy says, "I can see how much this hurts. I'm here to sit with you." One keeps pain at arm's length. The other honors it by entering the space together. Empathy also requires humility, the humility to accept that your perspective is not the only one, and that sometimes you will not fully understand, and that's okay. You do not need to experience the same struggle to honor it. What matters is your willingness to acknowledge it as real, as valid, as worthy of care. When you admit, "I can't fully know what you're going through, but I want to understand," you open the door wider than any perfectly phrased advice ever could. There's a story about a workplace conflict that taught me this lesson deeply. Two team members clashed constantly over deadlines. On the surface, it looked like laziness versus rigidity. But when I invited them into a mediated conversation and encouraged them to share feelings instead of accusations, a different truth emerged. One revealed she was caring for a sick parent, juggling hospital visits and work commitments. The other admitted he feared missing deadlines would cost him his reputation with leadership. Both had legitimate concerns, yet neither had paused to consider the other's reality. Once empathy entered the room, hostility gave way to collaboration. They adjusted their workflow to support each other, and tension dissolved into partnership. That transformation was not about new policies. It was about seeing each other as human beings first. For you, the practice of empathy can start with simple shifts. Replace statements like, "You always," with questions like, "Can you tell me how this feels for you?" Reflect feelings back. "It sounds like you're frustrated," or "I hear how excited you are." Use pauses generously, allowing silence to give space for honesty. These micro-gestures communicate volumes. They say, "I care about your experience more than I care about rushing to the end of this conversation." But empathy is not only directed outward, it also requires turning inward. How often do you offer empathy to yourself? Think of the harsh inner critic that scolds you for every mistake. If a friend spoke to you that way, you would feel crushed. Why, then, do you allow yourself to? Practicing self-empathy, acknowledging your own fatigue, forgiving your own missteps, speaking to yourself with compassion, strengthens your ability to extend empathy to others. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. By caring for yourself, you replenish what you offer in relationships. You may be wondering, does empathy make you vulnerable to being taken advantage of? It's true. When you open your heart, you risk being hurt. But empathy does not mean abandoning boundaries. In fact, clear boundaries make empathy sustainable. You can listen deeply without absorbing all of someone else's pain. You can validate feelings without agreeing to unhealthy behavior. Empathy is not surrender. It is strength wrapped in kindness. Another powerful dimension of empathy is its role in conflict resolution. When tempers rise, logic alone rarely calms the storm. But when one person demonstrates empathy, acknowledging the other's frustration, reflecting their concerns, walls begin to fall. Think of the last argument you had. Imagine if, instead of defending yourself immediately, you had said, "I can see why that upset you." How different might the outcome have been? Empathy is often the shortcut to peace. In personal relationships, empathy creates intimacy. When partners practice it consistently, they build trust that withstands stress. Imagine your spouse coming home after a long day. You could respond with a perfunctory, "How was work?" Or you could notice the heaviness in their posture and say, "You look drained." Do you want to talk about it or just rest? That subtle shift says, I see you. And in that moment, love deepens. In parenting, empathy becomes even more vital. A child who feels misunderstood may withdraw, but one who feels validated grows resilient. When a child cries over a broken toy, an empathetic response isn't, it's just a toy, don't cry. Instead, it's, I know that was your favorite. It hurts when something you love breaks. Such responses teach children that their feelings are valid and that communication is safe. Over time, they learn to extend the same empathy to others. Empathy also transforms leadership. Leaders who listen to their teams, who consider the struggles behind performance, who validate concerns even when they cannot change circumstances. Those leaders inspire loyalty and effort. Employees may forget a leader's technical brilliance, but they never forget how that leader made them feel. A culture of empathy turns workplaces from mechanical systems into human communities. Consider, too, how empathy changes the way you move through society. Standing in line at a store, you notice the cashier's weary eyes. Instead of rushing through, you say, "It looks like it's been a long day. I appreciate you." That one moment can shift their mood because you acknowledged their humanity. These small, everyday choices ripple outward, creating a culture of compassion in places where indifference often reigns. So how do you cultivate empathy as a daily habit? Begin with listening, truly listening, without interrupting, without rehearsing your reply. Let silence be part of the rhythm. Next, ask questions that invite depth. What was that like for you? How are you really feeling about this? Then, validate. I hear you. That makes sense. Finally, resist the urge to fix immediately. Sometimes the most healing words are simply, I'm here with you. Over time, empathy reshapes not just your conversations but your identity. You become the kind of person others seek out, not because you have all the answers, but because you create space where they feel safe to be themselves. That is rare. That is priceless. As you lean into empathy, you will find that your relationships grow richer, your conflicts become more manageable, and your presence becomes a gift in every room you enter. And perhaps most importantly, you will discover that empathy is not something you give away until you are empty. It is something that multiplies. The more you practice it, the more you receive it in return. Picture yourself sitting at a table with someone who matters deeply to you. They are speaking, words flowing, but your mind drifts, thinking of tomorrow's responsibilities, the unread notifications on your phone, the lingering memory of something you should have said earlier in the day. You nod occasionally, even murmur, But you know, if you're honest, that you are not really there. Later, when you recall the conversation, you struggle to remember the details, and you realize you missed a chance to truly connect. This is the danger of shallow listening. It tricks you into believing you are present when, in reality, your attention is elsewhere. Now imagine the opposite. You set your phone aside, lean forward slightly, and allow your eyes to rest fully on the person speaking. Instead of preparing your reply, you quiet your inner dialogue and focus on theirs. You notice the tremor in their voice, the hesitation between sentences, the way their hands fidget with the edge of their sleeve. You respond not only to their words, but to the emotion beneath them. That kind of listening is rare, and because it is rare, it is powerful. It doesn't just capture information, it heals. I once had a colleague who was known for his sharp intelligence, but even more for his ability to listen. When he was with you, it felt as though the world had stopped. He didn't rush you, didn't interrupt, didn't glance at his watch. And when he finally spoke, his response always revealed layers of understanding you hadn't realized you had shared. People trusted him, not simply because he was knowledgeable, but because he listened with the kind of depth that made others feel valued. His influence stretched far beyond his official role, and I came to see that his listening was his greatest leadership tool. Listening that heals goes beyond the transfer of facts. It acknowledges the human need to be seen and validated. Think about the last time you were upset. Did you crave a solution, or did you crave someone to simply hear you? Most of us long less for answers and more for presence. A listening ear is often the balm that allows pain to soften, anger to cool, or confusion to clear. This is why listening is not passive. It is an active gift, one that requires intention and energy. There are different layers of listening. At the surface, there is hearing, the physical act of registering sound. Deeper still, there is focusing, concentrating on the words being said. But the deepest layer is empathetic listening, hearing not only the words, but the emotions behind them, the unspoken story woven into tone, pauses, and body language. This level requires you to step out of your own frame of reference and into theirs. It means you stop asking, "What do I think about this?" and start asking, "What are they experiencing right now?" One afternoon, I met a friend at a cafe. She had just gone through a breakup, and her voice trembled as she recounted the details. My instinct was to reassure her quickly, to say, "You'll find someone better. It's their loss." But instead, I held back and let her speak. I nodded, repeated back what I heard. "You feel betrayed. You thought you could trust him." And let silence stretch long enough for her tears to fall without shame. Hours later, as we stood to leave, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for listening. I feel lighter." She never once asked for advice. She only needed someone to share the weight. That day reminded me that listening can be more healing than any string of comforting words. To practice this kind of listening, you must first manage your own distractions. Put the phone away. Silence notifications. Turn your body toward the speaker. Your nonverbal cues communicate as loudly as your words. Leaning in signals interest. Restless tapping signals impatience. Even if you believe you are listening, the other person will sense the truth in your body language. Choose to be fully present. Next, reflect back what you hear, not mechanically, but sincerely. If someone says, "I'm exhausted with all these responsibilities," you might reply, "It sounds like you're carrying more than feels manageable." This reflection does two things. It assures them you heard correctly, and it often clarifies their own feelings. People sometimes discover what they truly feel only after hearing it reflected by a compassionate listener. Another important element is patience with silence. Many people rush to fill quiet moments, fearing awkwardness. But silence is not empty. It is fertile. When you allow it, the speaker often dives deeper, sharing thoughts they might otherwise withhold. A pause can be the doorway to honesty. Resist the urge to interrupt or hurry them along. Healing often happens in the pauses. Listening that heals also involves withholding judgment. Imagine someone confessing a mistake to you. If your face tightens in disapproval, or if you immediately launch into critique, they retreat. But if you respond with openness, That must have been tough to carry. You create space for growth. Judgment closes doors. Understanding opens them. In families, this kind of listening can transform dynamics. Picture a teenager trying to explain their frustration. Parents often rush to correct or advise, but the teenager walks away feeling unheard. What if, instead, the parent leaned in and said, "I hear you. School feels overwhelming, and you're tired of the pressure." That doesn't mean agreeing with every complaint. It means validating the experience before offering guidance. When children feel heard, they are more open to direction. In romantic relationships, listening is often the hinge between intimacy and distance. Arguments escalate when partners stop listening and start rehearsing counter-arguments. But when one partner pauses to say, "Let me make sure I understand. You felt ignored when I stayed late at work," the tone changes. Instead of sparring, the couple begins to collaborate. Listening does not erase disagreement, but it transforms it from a battle to a dialogue. At work, leaders who practice healing, listening become anchors for their teams. Employees may face deadlines, stress, or personal struggles. A leader who listens deeply communicates, "You matter beyond your output." Such listening fosters loyalty, creativity, and resilience. People will go further for leaders who treat them as humans, not machines. It is worth noting that listening does not always mean agreeing. You can listen deeply to someone whose views you oppose. The act of hearing them fully does not compromise your beliefs. It strengthens your credibility. When people feel genuinely heard, they are more open to hearing you in return. Dialogue flourishes where listening is prioritized. If you want to develop this skill, practice small steps daily. When someone speaks to you, focus on one question. What is it like to be them right now? Let that question guide your attention. When they finish, instead of jumping in with your perspective, reflect what you heard. Pay attention to body language, tone, and pauses. Allow silence to work for you. Over time, these habits build into a presence that others instinctively trust. There is also the dimension of self-listening. How often do you give your own heart the same space you offer others? Many of us drown out our own feelings with noise, busyness, or criticism. Healing begins when you listen inwardly with compassion. Journaling, meditation, or simply sitting in silence can uncover truths you've been ignoring. When you listen to yourself, you grow more capable of listening to others. The impact of healing listening cannot be overstated. Friendships grow deeper, conflicts soften, workplaces thrive, families flourish. People gravitate toward those who make them feel understood. And as you practice, you discover something unexpected. The gift you offer others returns to you. When you listen with presence, others begin to listen to you with the same depth. Relationships become mutual sanctuaries of trust. So let this truth settle in. Every time you choose to listen with full presence, you are not just gathering information. You are healing. You are telling someone, your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter. Few gifts are more powerful than that. Love, for all its wonder, often stumbles not because of the absence of affection, but because of the absence of understanding. Picture two people who care deeply for each other, sitting across from one another in frustration, each convinced the other does not hear them. One says, "You never listen." The other snaps back, "That's not true. I always listen." But beneath the clash of words lies the real wound. Both feel unseen, unacknowledged, unheard. Relationships unravel not from a lack of love, but from miscommunication that hardens into distance. I remember a couple I once knew who seemed perfect from the outside. They laughed at the same jokes, enjoyed similar hobbies, and posted smiling photos that made others envy their bond. Yet behind closed doors, they struggled. She wanted reassurance, but when she asked for it, he thought she was criticizing him. He wanted appreciation, but when he mentioned it, she heard blame. Their words collided, never connecting, leaving both feeling alone in the presence of someone they adored. It wasn't the absence of love that strained them, but the failure to decode each other's language of communication. Romantic relationships demand a special kind of attentiveness. They are more intimate than friendships, more emotionally charged than professional exchanges, and more vulnerable than almost any other bond. When you open your heart to someone, you crave not only to be loved, but also to be understood. That requires communication that is patient, empathetic, and deliberate. You can love someone fiercely and still fail them daily if your communication builds walls instead of bridges. Think about how often arguments between partners spiral out of control. A disagreement about chores morphs into a battle about respect. A complaint about time spent together becomes an accusation about priorities. What begins as a small crack widens into a chasm because neither person stops to listen beneath the words. The true message, "I want to feel valued," or "I need to feel close to you," gets buried under defensive retorts. One powerful practice is using I statements. Instead of saying, "You never spend time with me," which provokes defensiveness, you might say, "I feel lonely when we don't spend much time together." The shift is subtle, but profound. It takes the spotlight off blame and places it on your own experience. Your partner is more likely to lean in rather than recoil. Communication that heals begins not with accusation, but with vulnerability. Another key is choosing the right time. Too often, couples try to resolve deep conflicts in the wrong moments, when one is exhausted, distracted, or emotionally charged. Timing matters as much as tone. Imagine trying to fix a leaky faucet during a storm. No matter how skilled you are, the conditions aren't right. Similarly, choosing a calm, intentional moment to talk about sensitive issues creates space for connection rather than escalation. Listening, as always, is the heartbeat. In love, listening means putting aside the urge to win or to prove your point. It means asking, "What does my partner need me to hear right now?" and silencing the inner lawyer, preparing your defense. When you listen in this way, you uncover the longing beneath the complaint. The messy argument about dishes may not be about dishes at all. It may be about the desire to feel supported. I once counseled a friend who constantly fought with her boyfriend about his late work hours. She accused him of caring more about his career than her, while he insisted he was working hard for their future. When they finally slowed down enough to listen, the real truth emerged. She felt lonely and unimportant. He felt pressured to provide and afraid of failing. Once they named those deeper feelings, the conflict softened. They began to compromise, not by changing who they were, but by honoring each other's hidden needs. Nonverbal communication plays an equally powerful role in romantic relationships. A gentle touch on the arm, a warm glance across the room, or leaning closer during a serious conversation can convey safety and affection more loudly than any words. Conversely, crossed arms, rolled eyes, or a distracted glance at a phone can wound, even if your words are kind. Your partner reads not only what you say, but how you say it, and often, what you don't. Boundaries are another cornerstone. Many people fear boundaries in romance, mistaking them for distance. But healthy boundaries are the framework that keeps love safe. Saying, "I need time to recharge after work before diving into conversations," is not shutting your partner out. It's giving them a roadmap to connect with you effectively. When both partners respect each other's limits, resentment shrinks and respect flourishes. And then there is the art of repair. No matter how skilled you become, missteps will happen. You will say things you regret. You will misinterpret, mishear, or mishandle your partner's feelings. What matters most is how quickly and sincerely you repair the rupture. A heartfelt apology, paired with a willingness to change, can restore intimacy more strongly than pretending nothing happened. Repair is not weakness. It is the glue that binds love through storms. Romantic communication also thrives on celebration. It's easy to focus on resolving conflicts. But what about amplifying joy? Simple affirmations. "I appreciate how hard you work. I love the way you make me laugh. I feel safe with you." Strengthen the bond daily. Gratitude expressed out loud keeps relationships vibrant, reminding both partners why they chose each other in the first place. In my own life, I've seen how small rituals of communication create lasting intimacy. A nightly check-in, a weekly coffee date, a habit of leaving notes. These are not grand gestures, but steady threads woven into the fabric of love. They remind you both that the relationship is not a background detail, but a living, breathing priority. Love is fragile when it rests only on feelings. Feelings rise and fall like tides. What steadies love is communication, listening, vulnerability, timing, nonverbal cues, boundaries, repair, celebration. When you practice these consistently, you transform not only how you speak, but how you love. The truth is, no one enters a relationship with perfect skills. We bring our histories, our wounds, our habits. But you can grow. You can learn to listen more deeply, speak more gently, and respond more thoughtfully. You can choose to turn conflict into connection, misunderstandings into opportunities for empathy. And every time you do, you lay another brick in the foundation of a love that endures. Because at the heart of romance is not grand passion or perfect compatibility, but the steady choice to keep understanding each other. And that choice is made, moment by moment, through communication. Workplaces often feel like microcosms of society. Diverse people with different backgrounds, temperaments, and values all thrown into one space, expected to collaborate under pressure. When communication flows well, the environment feels alive with ideas, camaraderie, and purpose. But when communication falters, the same place can become tense, draining, and full of invisible walls. You've likely felt both sides, the thrill of a team clicking together, and the frustration of misunderstandings that derail progress. What determines which side you experience most often is not the talent of the people, but the quality of communication that binds them. Conflict is inevitable when humans work together. Picture a team preparing for an important deadline. One member wants to move quickly, prioritizing speed. Another insists on perfection, slowing things down. A third feels left out of decisions and begins to disengage. Soon tension simmers, and if left unaddressed, it spills into sharp words, passive resistance, or avoidance. The project suffers, morale plummets, and what began as a clash of styles becomes a breakdown of trust. Yet conflict doesn't have to be destructive. When handled through effective communication, it can be the spark that ignites creativity, the friction that polishes ideas, the crucible where trust is forged. The key lies in shifting the mindset about conflict itself. Instead of viewing it as a battle to win, see it as information to explore. Conflict reveals differences in priorities, perspectives, or unmet needs. If you can learn to ask, what is this tension trying to tell us? You begin to unlock its hidden value. For example, the team member pushing for speed may reveal the importance of meeting client expectations, while the perfectionist highlights the risk of errors. Together, these perspectives create a balanced solution that neither would have reached alone. I remember a time when two colleagues in my office clashed repeatedly over strategy. Meetings were filled with thinly veiled sarcasm and defensive comments. Instead of ignoring it, their manager invited them into a private conversation, asking each to share their perspective while the other listened without interrupting. At first, both resisted, but as they repeated back what they heard, "So you're saying you worry about long-term sustainability?" A new tone emerged. By the end, what once felt like an impassable rift turned into mutual respect. The conflict didn't vanish, but it transformed into collaboration because communication shifted from attack to understanding. One practical tool for addressing workplace conflict is the use of I statements. Much like in personal relationships, instead of saying, "You never deliver on time," which sounds like an accusation, you can say, "I feel stressed when deadlines are missed because it affects the whole team." The focus moves from blame to impact, encouraging dialogue rather than defensiveness. Similarly, acknowledging the other person's perspective, "I see why you want more time for quality control," creates a sense of balance. Respect doesn't require agreement. It requires recognition. Another vital strategy is active listening in meetings. Too often, people wait for their turn to speak instead of absorbing what others are saying. They mentally rehearse their rebuttals while nodding politely. But when someone genuinely listens, asking clarifying questions, reflecting key points, the dynamic changes. The speaker feels valued, and the group uncovers insights that surface only when people feel safe enough to share openly. In fact, some of the most innovative solutions in workplaces are born not from brainstorming sessions filled with noise, but from the quiet trust built when people know they are truly heard. Communication also plays a critical role in leadership. A leader's words can either inspire or deflate, motivate or confuse. Consider how a manager addresses a crisis. One who panics aloud spreads anxiety, while one who acknowledges the challenge calmly and outlines a clear plan fosters confidence. The words chosen matter, but so does the delivery, tone, body language, timing. Employees don't just listen to what leaders say. They watch how leaders embody their messages. Consistency between words and actions is the foundation of credibility. Feedback is another area where workplace communication often falters. Many dread giving or receiving feedback because it feels like criticism. But feedback, delivered with empathy, is a gift. The difference lies in how it's framed. You're careless with details, shuts someone down. I noticed a few errors in the report. Let's review strategies to catch them earlier. Next time, opens a path forward. Pairing honesty with respect transforms feedback from a source of tension into a tool for growth. Beyond conflict and feedback, communication shapes the overall culture of a workplace, an environment where people feel safe to express ideas, ask questions, and admit mistakes breeds innovation and loyalty. Contrast that with a culture of silence, where employees fear speaking up. The difference often comes down to the daily micro-communications, small acts of acknowledgement, respectful responses, transparent updates that collectively signal whether people's voices matter. I once worked with a leader who began every team meeting by asking, "What's one win and one challenge you're facing this week?" At first, people were hesitant, worried their challenges would be judged. But as the leader responded with empathy, "That sounds tough. How can we support you?" the team began opening up. Over time, those brief moments of sharing built a culture of honesty and mutual support. Productivity rose not because of stricter rules, but because of stronger communication. Technology adds another layer. Email, messaging platforms, and virtual meetings make communication faster, but also more prone to misunderstanding. A blunt email can sound harsher than intended. A missed tone in a chat can spark unnecessary conflict. That's why clarity and empathy matter even more in digital communication. Adding a simple phrase like, "I appreciate your effort on this," can soften a message that might otherwise seem cold. When face-to-face cues are missing, words carry greater weight, so choosing them thoughtfully is crucial. In high-pressure environments, it's tempting to prioritize efficiency over empathy, but research and experience show that people perform best when they feel respected and understood. Even in moments of urgency, a brief acknowledgement, "I know this deadline is stressful, but I believe in our ability to handle it together," can make the difference between burnout and resilience. Communication isn't a luxury in the workplace. It's the lifeline that sustains motivation and trust. So the question is not whether conflict will arise, but how you will respond when it does. Will you let frustration fester into division? Or will you lean into dialogue, seeking the truth beneath the tension? Will you rush to criticize? Or will you pause to listen? Every choice you make in communication shapes not only your relationships with colleagues, but also the success of your collective work. When you step into your workplace tomorrow, notice the small moments. The colleague who hesitates before speaking, the manager who looks tired, the teammate whose idea is brushed aside. These are opportunities to listen more deeply, to affirm more clearly, to speak more thoughtfully, because at its core, effective workplace communication is not about perfect words, but about consistent intention, to connect, to respect, to build together. And when you practice this intention, you discover that conflict no longer feels like a threat. It becomes, instead, a chance to grow, individually, collectively, and in ways that leave not just projects, but people stronger than before. Have you ever left a conversation feeling heavier than when you entered it? Not because of what was said, but because of what was misunderstood. Miscommunication is one of the most universal human experiences. Two people can hear the same words and walk away with completely different interpretations. This isn't just frustrating. It can be damaging. Friendships strain, families fracture, and workplaces grind to a halt, not because people lack goodwill, but because the message sent isn't the message received. I recall a project meeting where a simple statement, "We need this done soon," caused chaos. One person heard, "by the end of the week," another assumed, "within the month," and a third thought it meant as quickly as possible, regardless of quality. The result was confusion, rework, and simmering resentment. The problem wasn't commitment or competence, it was clarity. Misunderstandings thrive in the space where assumptions replace explicit communication. One of the most effective antidotes to misunderstanding is learning to slow down. In our fast-paced world, we rush through words, eager to move on to the next task. But when you take time to clarify, asking, just to be sure, when you say soon, do you mean days or weeks? You shrink the gap where confusion grows. Precision isn't pedantic, it's respectful. It honors both your time and the other person's by ensuring you're working from the same reality. Cultural differences add another layer. What seems polite in one culture may feel dismissive in another. I once attended a workshop where a colleague from a high-context culture, where much is implied rather than stated, responded to proposals with a polite nod. In her culture, this meant, "I hear you," not, "I agree." But others in the room assumed her nod was consent. Weeks later, when the plan unraveled, frustration erupted. It wasn't her intention to deceive. It was a cultural mismatch in communication style. This taught me the importance of asking explicitly, "Do you agree?" instead of assuming body language means the same thing to everyone. Language barriers create similar challenges. Even when speaking a shared language, idioms, humor, or slang can create confusion. Imagine telling a colleague from another country, "Let's play it by ear." They might look puzzled, not knowing you mean, "Let's decide as we go." Being mindful of simple, clear language doesn't mean dumbing down. It means choosing words that travel well across diverse listeners. Emotions, too, can distort communication. Have you ever tried to talk while angry, only to realize later that your words were sharper than you intended? Or listened while upset, hearing criticism in a neutral statement? Our emotional state acts like a filter, coloring how we speak and hear. That's why pausing, taking a breath, letting strong feelings settle, often prevents words we can't take back. Choosing the right emotional moment to talk can be just as important as choosing the right words. Another hidden barrier is selective listening. We often hear only what confirms our beliefs. A manager who thinks an employee is lazy may filter every comment through that lens, missing signs of dedication. A partner who fears rejection may interpret silence as disinterest, even when it's not. Overcoming this requires curiosity. Instead of assuming, ask. "Can you tell me what you meant by that?" is a simple phrase that can dissolve entire walls of misunderstanding. Digital communication, while convenient, magnifies these risks. Without tone, facial expressions, or body language, emails and texts are ripe for misinterpretation. A short reply like "fine" can sound cold, even when it was meant neutrally. Emojis, punctuation, even the timing of a reply, all become loaded with unintended meaning. That's why adding a touch of warmth or context is wise. "Fine, thanks for handling this" communicates very differently than "fine." When in doubt, over-communicate clarity and empathy. Yet misunderstandings aren't always failures. They can be opportunities. When handled with openness, they reveal assumptions, biases, and blind spots we didn't know we had. I once misheard a friend's comment and reacted defensively. When she clarified, I realized I had projected my own insecurity into her words. That moment humbled me, teaching me to check my interpretations before reacting. Misunderstandings, when approached with humility, can deepen connection instead of breaking it. Practical strategies can help. Paraphrasing, repeating back what you think you heard, works wonders. If someone says, "I don't know if I can handle this," you might reply, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed. This not only ensures accuracy, but also conveys empathy. Similarly, summarizing key points at the end of discussions prevents confusion. So we're agreed. Next Friday at 3 p.m., correct? These small steps may feel unnecessary in the moment, but they save countless hours of frustration later. It's also powerful to adopt the mindset of assuming positive intent. Most misunderstandings arise not from malice, but from misalignment. When you believe the other person is trying their best, you approach confusion with curiosity rather than accusation. Instead of, "You're lying," try, "I think I may have misunderstood. Can you explain?" That shift in tone often transforms defensiveness into dialogue. In families, misunderstandings can carry emotional weight. A parent tells a child, "You need to try harder," meaning encouragement. But the child hears only, "I'm not good enough." Partners argue about logistics, but underneath, one feels unappreciated, while the other feels controlled. These moments call for compassion, slowing down, clarifying feelings, and gently asking, "What did you hear me say?" can uncover the gap and bridge it. In professional life, misunderstandings can cost money, time, and trust. That's why organizations that prioritize clear communication through training, shared vocabulary, and open feedback often outperform those that don't. A workplace that values clarity reduces errors and fosters collaboration because people know where they stand. Ultimately, misunderstandings remind us of a profound truth. Words are fragile vessels for human complexity. They carry meaning, but not always perfectly. Tone, culture, emotion, and assumption all shape how they land. To communicate effectively is to accept this fragility and work with it by clarifying, checking, and listening with humility. So the next time you feel frustration rising because someone doesn't get it, pause. Ask yourself, could it be a misunderstanding, not malice? Could clarity, patience, or empathy turn this moment from rupture into repair? When you treat misunderstandings as invitations to understand more deeply, you transform them from stumbling blocks into stepping stones toward stronger connections. Stand for a moment in front of an audience, whether it's 10 people in a conference room, 50 at a community event, or hundreds in a theater. Your palms grow damp, your heart thuds against your ribs, and your mind races with 1,000 what-ifs. What if I forget my words? What if they judge me? What if I fail? This surge of adrenaline is familiar to almost everyone. Public speaking ranks among the greatest fears across cultures, often beating out the fear of heights, darkness, or even flying. Yet here's the paradox. The ability to stand up and speak with clarity and confidence has the power to open doors that nothing else can. The good news is that public speaking is not a gift bestowed on a lucky few. It's a skill shaped by preparation, practice, and mindset. I remember my first major presentation at work. I spent the night before tossing in bed, imagining blank stares and awkward silences. When the day arrived, I stumbled through my slides, speaking too fast, barely breathing. The feedback was kind, but honest. "You clearly knew your material, but we couldn't follow you." That sting could have made me retreat, but instead, it became a turning point. I realized that knowing your content is only half the battle. Communicating it effectively is the other half. Preparation is the foundation. Just as an architect sketches blueprints before laying bricks, you must build a structure for your talk. Begin with clarity. What is the single most important idea you want your audience to remember? If they forget everything else, what one message should linger? Once you know this, design your talk around it. Every story, statistic, or slide should serve this central idea. Without this anchor, your words risk scattering like leaves in the wind. Organizing your material into a clear arc also helps. Think of your presentation as a journey, an opening that captures attention, a middle that develops the message with stories and evidence, and a close that leaves a lasting impression. Too many talks meander without direction, leaving audiences confused. But when you craft a deliberate path, you guide listeners with confidence, helping them feel safe in your hands. Then comes the craft of delivery. Words are only part of your message. Your tone, pace, gestures, and posture carry as much weight, sometimes more. A monotone voice drains energy from even the most brilliant ideas. A rushed pace overwhelms listeners. A sluggish one bores them. Instead, aim for variety. Let your voice rise and fall like music. Use pauses strategically to let important points sink in. Silence, far from being an enemy, can be one of your strongest tools. It builds anticipation and gives your audience space to reflect. Nonverbal cues amplify or undermine your words. Eye contact creates connection, signaling sincerity. Open gestures convey confidence and approachability. Slouching or crossing your arms may suggest disinterest, even if your words are warm. Record yourself once. It may feel uncomfortable, but it reveals habits you don't notice in real time. Do you fidget with your hands? Speak too quickly? Avoid looking at the audience? Awareness is the first step to change. Another powerful technique is storytelling. Facts inform, but stories transform. When you share a personal anecdote, your first job interview, a moment of failure, a lesson learned, you invite the audience into your experience. They feel with you, not just think with you. Neuroscience shows that stories activate more areas of the brain than abstract information alone. That's why people remember narratives long after they forget data. So weave stories into your talks, even in professional contexts. A story about how a new process saved a colleague hours of work will resonate more than a chart alone. Public speaking anxiety, however, can't be ignored. Nerves are normal, but they don't have to control you. One trick is reframing anxiety as excitement. The physical symptoms, racing heart, sweaty palms, are almost identical. Instead of telling yourself, "I'm terrified," say, "I'm energized." This subtle shift changes panic into fuel. Another method is grounding. Take slow breaths, feel your feet on the floor, and remind yourself that you don't need to be perfect. You only need to be present. Gradual exposure also builds confidence. Start small. Speak up in a meeting. Volunteer to introduce a colleague. Practice a toast among friends. Each step strengthens your comfort zone, preparing you for larger stages. Nobody becomes a confident speaker overnight, but consistency turns fear into familiarity. It helps to remember. Audiences are more forgiving than you think. They want you to succeed because your success makes their time worthwhile. Even if you stumble, if you speak with sincerity, they will root for you. I once watched a speaker lose her place in her notes. Instead of panicking, she laughed, admitted it, and found her way back. The audience applauded, not because she was flawless, but because she was human. That moment reminded me that authenticity often matters more than polish. Technology can support or sabotage you. Slides should enhance, not overwhelm. Keep them clean, with minimal text and strong visuals. Your audience came to hear you, not to read paragraphs on a screen. Practice with your equipment beforehand. Technical glitches happen, but preparation minimizes them. If something fails, like a clicker or microphone, keep calm. Often, the way you handle mishaps impresses more than if everything ran smoothly. One underestimated element is engagement. Public speaking should not feel like a monologue. Ask rhetorical questions. Invite a show of hands. Share a story. Then pause. Have you ever felt that way? These small interactions turn passive listeners into active participants. And when people participate, they remember. Finally, end with impact. Too many talks fade away with a week. That's all. Thank you. Instead, return to your central message and close with energy. A call to reflection. What one action will you take today? Or a vivid story can echo in the minds of your audience long after they leave. Mastering public speaking isn't about eliminating nerves or memorizing perfect lines. It's about connecting, sharing your ideas, your story, your humanity. Each time you step forward, you practice not just speaking, but leading. And with practice, the fear that once made your knees shake becomes the very force that carries your words with power. So the next time your heart races as you face a room full of eyes, remember, that energy is not your enemy. It is your ally, reminding you that what you have to say matters. And when you speak with preparation, presence, and authenticity, you don't just deliver information, you leave a mark. You glance around your workplace and notice how differently people approach communication. One colleague is direct and concise, delivering points in sharp bullet form. Another thrives on details, weaving long explanations with every nuance. A third prefers casual, relational conversation before diving into business. The success of any team depends on learning how to navigate these styles, adjusting your approach without losing your authenticity. In the workplace, communication is not merely about passing along information. It is about building influence, trust, and momentum. Think of a leader you admired. Chances are, their impact was not based solely on technical brilliance, but on how they communicated. They knew how to clarify vision, motivate teams, and resolve conflicts without crushing morale. Their words carried weight because they combined confidence with empathy. On the other hand, think of a boss or colleague whose poor communication created confusion or resentment. Their ideas may have been good, but their delivery undermined them. This contrast reveals the central truth. Communication is the engine of influence. In modern organizations, persuasion is a daily requirement. Whether you are pitching an idea, requesting resources, or leading a team through change, you are constantly seeking buy-in. But persuasion is not manipulation. It is alignment. It is about connecting your message to what others value, showing them how your proposal meets their goals as well as yours. For example, instead of saying, "We should adopt this new software because I prefer it," you might say, "This system reduces errors by 20%, saving us time and helping us meet deadlines more consistently." Suddenly, the conversation shifts from personal preference to shared benefit. Clarity is essential. Many workplace conflicts arise not from bad intentions, but from vague communication. An email that says, "Please finish this soon," leaves room for misunderstanding. Does soon mean by the end of the day? This week? Next month? Ambiguity wastes time. Precision saves it. Replacing vague phrases with specific timelines or deliverables not only prevents mistakes, but also signals professionalism. People respect those who communicate clearly because it shows respect for their time. Meetings are another area where communication makes or breaks productivity. We've all sat through gatherings where discussion circles endlessly without conclusion, leaving everyone more confused than before. Effective communication turns meetings into engines of progress, setting clear objectives, giving each participant space to contribute, and summarizing action items at the end transforms meetings from time drains into moments of alignment. And as someone participating, your ability to listen actively, acknowledge others' points, and build on ideas creates a collaborative atmosphere that elevates everyone. But perhaps the most underrated workplace skill is feedback. Too often, feedback is given as criticism that bruises instead of guidance that builds. Think about the difference between "this report is sloppy" and "I noticed some errors in the report. Can we walk through ways to catch them earlier?" The first attacks character. The second focuses on improvement. Effective feedback is specific, respectful, and oriented toward growth, and receiving feedback with openness, resisting the urge to defend, and instead asking, "What can I learn from this?" demonstrates maturity that colleagues and leaders remember. Conflict, inevitable in any team, is where communication skills shine brightest. Misunderstandings escalate when people prioritize winning over resolving. Yet when you approach conflict with curiosity, "Help me understand your perspective," you shift from adversaries to collaborators. Conflict, when handled with respect, often leads to better solutions than if everyone had agreed from the start. Diverse opinions, if communicated constructively, are the raw material of innovation. Nonverbal cues are as important in workplaces as in personal life. Imagine a manager delivering praise with arms crossed, face expressionless. The words may say, "Good job," but the body says indifference. Contrast that with open gestures, eye contact, and a smile. The same words now carry sincerity. In video calls, this becomes even more crucial. A slight nod, a warm tone, or leaning toward the camera shows engagement even through a screen. Small signals accumulate into powerful impressions. Trust is the currency of professional life, and communication is how it is earned. Consistency matters, following through on promises, being transparent when challenges arise, and owning mistakes build credibility. People may forgive errors in judgment, but they rarely forgive dishonesty. Saying, "I don't know, but I'll find out," communicates more strength than pretending to have all the answers. Over time, these choices shape whether colleagues see you as reliable or not. Storytelling is another tool professionals often overlook. Data and logic are persuasive, but stories make them memorable. When proposing an idea, share a real example. Last quarter, a client nearly left because of errors this system would have prevented. Stories paint pictures that numbers alone cannot. They appeal not just to the mind, but to the imagination, helping others see the impact of your proposal. One of my colleagues once told me about her experience working under two different managers. The first communicated only through directives. "Do this by Friday." Work got done, but morale was low. The second manager explained why tasks mattered, asked for input, and celebrated progress. The workload didn't change, but the team's energy did. Communication transformed the atmosphere from obligation to purpose. That experience shaped her career, teaching her that influence doesn't come from authority alone, but from the way you engage people through words and presence. Even humor, used wisely, can strengthen workplace communication. A lighthearted comment can ease tension in a tough meeting, reminding everyone of their shared humanity. But humor must be inclusive and kind, never at someone else's expense. Done well, it builds camaraderie. Done poorly, it damages trust. In all of this, adaptability is key. You don't communicate with your CEO the same way you do with a peer. You don't persuade a data-driven colleague with vague stories, nor do you inspire a visionary thinker with endless statistics. Effective communicators adjust their style, not to manipulate, but to respect the preferences of their audience. This flexibility multiplies your influence because it meets people where they are. As you reflect on your own workplace, ask yourself, do people feel clearer, calmer, and more motivated after interacting with you? Or do they leave confused or drained? The answer reveals the kind of communicator you are today and the kind you can become. Every email, every meeting, every casual hallway conversation is a chance to practice influence through communication. And the reward is not just smoother projects or fewer conflicts. It is trust. It is credibility. It is the reputation of being someone whose words carry weight because they are thoughtful, clear, and aligned with action. In workplaces where many voices compete for attention, becoming that kind of communicator sets you apart, not just as a contributor, but as a leader, no matter your title. Imagine standing in a room filled with people from different corners of the world. One person bows slightly when greeting, another extends a hand for a firm shake, while a third simply smiles with a nod. The words spoken may be in the same language, but the meanings, expectations, and interpretations differ. This is the reality of communication across barriers, whether cultural, emotional, or linguistic. And while these barriers can divide, they can also become gateways to deeper understanding if you approach them with awareness and humility. Cultural differences are perhaps the most visible barrier. What feels respectful in one culture can feel abrupt in another. In some places, direct eye contact communicates confidence. In others, it may signal aggression. A casual joke in one culture might be interpreted as offensive in another. I once worked with a team that spanned 3 continents. During a call, a colleague from one country said, "We'll think about it," as a polite way of declining. But a teammate from another culture took it literally, waiting weeks for a decision that would never come. Frustration grew, not because anyone acted in bad faith, but because the same words carried different cultural weight. The lesson? Assumptions are dangerous. Curiosity is essential. To bridge cultural divides, cultivate the habit of asking rather than assuming. Simple questions like, "How do you usually prefer to handle feedback?" Or, "Is this deadline realistic in your context?" Invite clarity. Listening with respect, observing cues, and showing a willingness to adapt build trust faster than trying to impose your own style. The goal is not to erase differences, but to honor them while finding common ground. Language barriers create another layer of challenge. Even when you share a common language, accents, idioms, and word choices can distort meaning. Think of the phrase, "We'll table this discussion." In American English, it means postponing. In British English, it often means bringing it forward for immediate attention. Such small differences can derail collaboration. The remedy is clarity. Use simple, direct language, avoid unnecessary jargon, and confirm understanding with follow-up questions. Just to be clear, when you say table, do you mean delay or discuss now? That extra step prevents costly missteps. But some barriers are less visible. Emotional barriers often hide beneath the surface, quietly distorting communication. When someone feels defensive, ashamed, or fearful, they may filter every word through that lens. A manager's neutral comment, "This report needs revision," might feel to an anxious employee like an attack on their worth. A partner's silence may be interpreted as rejection when, in fact, they are simply tired. These barriers aren't about vocabulary or culture. They are about perception, shaped by emotion. Overcoming emotional barriers begins with creating safety. When people know they will not be ridiculed or dismissed, they are more likely to lower their defenses. This means using language that validates feelings without necessarily agreeing with them. Saying, "I can see this is frustrating for you," opens doors that "you're overreacting" slams shut. Respectful acknowledgement diffuses tension, making space for honest dialogue. I recall a team member who struggled with speaking up in meetings. Whenever she did, her voice trembled, and afterward she apologized repeatedly, even when her points were excellent. One day, I pulled her aside and said, "You don't need to apologize for sharing ideas. They're valuable." Her eyes lit up, not because I solved her nervousness instantly, but because I acknowledged the barrier and offered encouragement. That small moment helped her contribute more confidently over time. Sometimes, overcoming barriers is less about changing the other person and more about creating an environment where they feel safe to change themselves. Barriers also arise from assumptions and stereotypes. We often box people into categories before truly hearing them. She's young, so she probably lacks experience. He's from that department, so he won't understand our challenges. These silent prejudices filter how we interpret their words. To dismantle these barriers, practice what I call listening without labels. Approach each interaction as if you know nothing yet. Let the person reveal themselves rather than relying on the shortcuts of stereotype. Another subtle barrier is power dynamics. A junior employee may hesitate to speak honestly to a senior manager. A child may hold back from telling a parent the truth out of fear of punishment. A friend may withhold concerns because they don't want to upset the balance of the relationship. Power imbalances create silence, and silence is one of the hardest barriers to break. The antidote is intentional humility. Those in positions of influence must go out of their way to invite input, to say, "Your perspective matters," and mean it. True communication flourishes where power is shared, not hoarded. Technology adds both opportunities and barriers. Virtual communication allows us to connect across the globe, but it strips away many nonverbal cues. Misunderstandings multiply when you cannot see a colleague's expression or hear the warmth in their tone. That's why in digital spaces, you must overcompensate with clarity and empathy. Use video when possible. Add context to messages. And don't assume silence means agreement. Ask directly, "Does this make sense? Do you have concerns?" Inviting dialogue helps break the barrier of digital distance. Practical strategies can help you break through barriers of all kinds. Start by slowing down. Rushed communication magnifies errors. Pausing to clarify, summarize, or invite questions shows care. Next, use reflective language. "So what I hear you saying is..." This technique uncovers hidden misalignments before they harden into conflict. Third, cultivate patience. Barriers don't dissolve instantly. They require consistent effort. Each time you choose understanding over assumption, you chip away at the wall. Stories illustrate this better than theory. A friend once told me about a disagreement with her elderly father. She wanted him to use a smartphone so she could check on him easily. But he resisted, saying, "I don't need it." She interpreted his words as stubbornness, but beneath them was fear. Fear of technology he didn't understand. Fear of feeling foolish. When she finally paused and asked, "Are you worried it'll be too complicated?" he admitted his anxiety. Together, they found a simple phone with larger icons, bridging the barrier not with force, but with empathy. Ultimately, barriers remind us that communication is not automatic. It is fragile, easily derailed by culture, language, emotion, power, or technology. But fragility is not weakness. It is an invitation to care. When you approach every conversation with humility, curiosity, and patience, barriers become opportunities to build trust where it might not have existed otherwise. So the next time you feel the wall of misunderstanding rising between you and someone else, resist the urge to push harder. Instead, step back, breathe, and ask, what barrier might be at play here? What can I do to lower it? That single question shifts you from frustration to possibility. And in that shift, you often find that the wall you feared was taller than it truly is. Sometimes, all it takes is a small step of empathy to begin tearing it down. You step onto a stage, the air heavy with anticipation. Rows of faces stare back at you, waiting for your words to begin shaping their thoughts. In that moment, you understand that public speaking is not simply about conveying information. It is about creating an experience. Every pause, every gesture, every rise and fall of your voice weaves into a tapestry that either captivates or loses your audience. And though it may feel intimidating, the truth is simple. The power to speak with impact is already within you. It only needs to be cultivated. I remember one of my earliest speaking engagements outside of work. The audience was small, maybe 30 people. Yet my hands shook as though I was addressing a stadium. My notes blurred, my throat went dry, and halfway through, I realized I was reading more to the page than to the people in front of me. Afterward, a mentor approached me and said something that stayed with me. They don't remember your words. They remember how you made them feel. That single sentence shifted my entire perspective. Speaking with impact is less about memorizing lines and more about forging connection. Preparation, of course, matters. The most impactful speakers rarely wing it. They study their audience, refine their message, and rehearse until their delivery feels natural. Yet preparation is not about scripting every word. It is about internalizing your message so deeply that you can deliver it with flexibility. If you know your central point by heart, you can adapt to the room, adjust your pacing, and even recover gracefully if technology fails. Think of preparation as the scaffolding that supports your authenticity, not a cage that traps you. An impactful speech often begins with a hook, a story, a question, or a vivid image draws people in. Imagine opening a talk about resilience not with statistics, but with, "At 23, I stood in an empty apartment with 2 suitcases and a broken dream, wondering how to start over." Suddenly, your audience leans forward. They are not just hearing, they are feeling. That is the power of a compelling opening. Once you have attention, sustaining it requires rhythm. Speak too fast, and your audience drowns. Too slow, and they drift. The best speakers vary their pace, accelerating with excitement, slowing with gravity, pausing for reflection. Pauses, especially, are underestimated. A pause after an important statement gives the audience a moment to absorb it. It also signals confidence. You are not afraid of silence because you know your words carry weight. Gestures, posture, and facial expressions amplify your message. Imagine telling a story of triumph while standing rigid, arms glued to your sides. The words say victory, but the body says fear. Now imagine raising your arms in a wide gesture, your face alight with energy. The same words now inspire. Nonverbal communication doesn't just support your message, it embodies it. Practicing in front of a mirror or recording yourself can reveal unconscious habits and help you align your body with your intention. Connection is the heartbeat of impactful speaking. Audiences sense when a speaker is performing versus when they are conversing. Speak to them, not at them. Make eye contact, not scanning mechanically, but genuinely locking eyes with individuals for a beat, letting them feel chosen. When you shift your gaze across the room, the entire audience feels included, even in large halls. This technique creates intimacy. Storytelling remains one of the most potent tools in your arsenal. Facts fade, but stories linger. Neuroscience shows that when we hear stories, our brains release chemicals like oxytocin that foster empathy and connection. That's why speakers who sprinkle stories throughout their message capture hearts as well as minds. And stories need not be grand epics. They can be simple moments. The first time you failed and learned. A chance encounter that shifted your perspective. A struggle your audience can see themselves in. These stories become mirrors in which listeners recognize their own lives. Yet impact also requires authenticity. Audiences can sense when you are trying too hard to impress. Vulnerability often resonates more than perfection. Sharing a mistake or admitting nerves can make you relatable. I once watched a speaker drop his notes halfway through. Instead of panicking, he chuckled and said, "Well, that wasn't part of the plan, but neither is life." The audience erupted in laughter and applause. His humanity endeared him more than flawless delivery ever could. Practical techniques can strengthen your presence. Breathing deeply before speaking calms nerves and steadies your voice. Practicing vocal variety, changing pitch, volume, and pace, keeps your delivery dynamic. Structuring content with clear signposts. There are 3 points I want to share. Helps audiences follow along. Even something as simple as smiling, genuinely, creates warmth that draws listeners closer. But perhaps the most overlooked aspect of speaking with impact is listening. Even on stage, communication is two-way. Pay attention to the audience's body language. Are they leaning in or checking their watches? Adjust accordingly. If they look confused, slow down or clarify. If they look restless, inject energy. Speaking with impact means being present, not just performing a pre-planned script. Feedback accelerates growth. After every speaking opportunity, ask trusted colleagues or friends, what resonated? What distracted? What could I improve? Recording your talks and reviewing them can be uncomfortable, but it reveals patterns you cannot see in the moment. Over time, these small adjustments compound, turning anxiety into confidence and competence into charisma. Impactful speaking also requires intention beyond the stage. Ask yourself, why am I speaking? Is it to inform, inspire, persuade, or comfort? The clearer your intention, the sharper your message. An audience can feel when a speaker is driven by purpose rather than ego. And when purpose guides you, even imperfections fade into insignificance. Think, too, about your closing. The end of a speech is the echo that lingers in the minds of listeners, instead of fading out with, "That's all I have." Close with conviction, a call to action, a powerful story, or a reflective question. Something that makes people carry your words with them long after they leave. When you learn to speak with impact, doors open, opportunities arise, not only because of what you know, but because of how you communicate it. Confidence grows, relationships deepen, and your influence expands. And it is not about becoming someone else. It is about bringing your truest self forward with clarity and courage. So the next time you face a room, large or small, remember, your role is not to perform, but to connect. Breathe deeply. Look into their eyes. Share your story. Speak your truth. And trust that when your words align with your heart, they will land exactly where they need to. Your phone buzzes, the screen lights up, and without thinking, you swipe it open. A quick scroll turns into minutes lost. A reply typed in haste sends a tone you didn't intend. And a public comment sparks a ripple that lingers far longer than you imagined. Welcome to the age of digital communication, where your words travel faster and farther than ever before, but also where misunderstandings multiply and reputations can hinge on a single message. The art of communication does not stop at face-to-face interactions. It extends into every email, text, post, and video call. In this digital world, clarity is your lifeline, unlike in-person conversations, where tone, gestures, and eye contact soften your message. Digital platforms strip those cues away. A simple "sure" in a text might sound agreeable to you but dismissive to the reader. Emojis, punctuation, and even response time become loaded with meaning. This means your words must carry more weight on their own. Taking an extra moment to add warmth, "Sure, happy to help," can transform how your message lands. Email remains a cornerstone of professional communication, yet it is also one of the easiest places for tone to misfire. Think about the difference between "Please send this by tomorrow" and "Could you send this by tomorrow? Thanks so much for your help." Both convey the same task, but the second builds goodwill. Effective emailers balance brevity with courtesy. They use clear subject lines, structure messages with readability in mind, and close with gratitude. A thoughtful email shows respect for the recipient's time and strengthens professional relationships. Social media adds another layer. Every post, comment, or like contributes to the story you are telling about yourself. The digital footprint you leave becomes a silent resume, shaping how colleagues, employers, friends, and even strangers perceive you. A casual rant or careless joke can close doors, while thoughtful contributions can open them. This does not mean curating a fake persona, but it does mean practicing mindfulness, asking yourself, does this post reflect who I want to be known as? Digital presence is not just about self-expression, it is about self-reputation. Video calls, once rare, are now a daily reality for many. They blend verbal and nonverbal communication, but add unique challenges. Lagging connections, camera angles, and background distractions can weaken your message. That is why preparation matters here too. Position your camera at eye level, use good lighting, and minimize background noise. Treat the virtual space as seriously as a physical one, because for the people on the other end, it is. Looking into the camera, not just the screen, simulates eye contact, making your presence feel more engaging. Texting, fast and casual, dominates personal communication, but its speed can backfire. How many conflicts have started with a misread text? A friend types, "Fine," and you spiral into worry. A colleague replies late, and you assume disinterest. The cure is simple. When the stakes are high, don't rely on text. Pick up the phone or arrange a face-to-face conversation. Texting is perfect for logistics, not for delicate emotions. Knowing when to switch channels is a hallmark of communication wisdom. Digital communication also tests your patience. The expectation of instant replies creates pressure and anxiety, yet constant availability is not sustainable. Setting boundaries, like turning off notifications during focus hours or clarifying your response times, protects your energy. Boundaries don't weaken relationships. They preserve them by ensuring you show up fully present when you do respond. Another hidden challenge is the permanence of digital words. Unlike spoken conversations that vanish into air, digital messages linger. An impulsive email can be forwarded, a social media post can resurface years later, and a private text can be shared without consent. This permanence is both a risk and an opportunity. It means you must be deliberate, never typing in anger, always rereading before sending. But it also means you can intentionally build a digital legacy of positivity, wisdom, and authenticity. I recall a colleague who once wrote a frustrated email late at night. In his exhaustion, his words came across as harsh and dismissive. By morning, the email had spread across teams, damaging his reputation. He learned, painfully, the power of the unsent draft. Now, he always writes emotional responses but saves them overnight. By morning, he either deletes them or rewrites them with clarity and respect. That small practice protects not only relationships, but also careers. Digital platforms also blur personal and professional lines. A quick joke in a group chat may seem harmless until it's interpreted differently by a colleague. A photo posted casually may be seen by future employers. This doesn't mean living in fear, but it does mean living with awareness. Ask yourself, would I be comfortable if this were shown to a wider audience? If the answer is no, pause. The pause in digital communication is as powerful as the pause in public speaking. It gives you time to choose wisely. But let's not view digital spaces only as minefields. They also offer profound opportunities. Technology allows you to maintain connections across continents, collaborate in real time, and share ideas with global audiences. A thoughtful message of encouragement can reach a friend thousands of miles away instantly. A professional insight shared online can spark partnerships you never imagined. When used with intention, digital tools amplify your ability to connect and influence. Practical steps can help you thrive. In emails, be concise but warm. In texts, add clarity with tone markers when needed. On social media, engage with respect and purpose. In video calls, prepare your environment as carefully as your words. And across all platforms, remember the human being on the other side of the screen. Technology connects devices. Communication connects hearts. Ultimately, digital communication asks you to blend two qualities: intentionality and empathy. Intentionality ensures your words are clear, respectful, and aligned with who you want to be. Empathy ensures you remember the humanity behind every username, every email address, every profile picture. When you combine both, you transform digital noise into digital connection. So as you send your next message, pause for just a breath. Ask yourself, does this communicate not just information, but respect? Not just speed, but sincerity? That single pause could be the difference between a message that fractures and a message that builds. In the digital world, your words echo longer and farther. Make them echoes worth hearing. As you reflect on the different forms of communication, verbal, nonverbal, digital, it becomes clear that all of these tools ultimately serve one powerful purpose: connection. Whether in personal relationships or the workplace, communication is how we share, understand, and collaborate. However, one of the most significant ways to leverage communication to its fullest is in the realm of personal growth. The way you communicate with yourself through your inner dialogue determines not only how others perceive you, but how you perceive your own potential. Many of us, without realizing it, communicate with ourselves in ways that limit our growth. Think about the last time you faced a challenge. Did you say to yourself, "I can't do this"? Or did you say, "This will be hard, but I will give it my best shot"? The difference between those two mindsets is profound. The first, filled with self-doubt, leads to stagnation. The second, a mindset rooted in self-belief, creates momentum toward progress. This shift in self-talk can be the key to unlocking your true potential. Positive affirmations, while often brushed off as wishful thinking, are scientifically proven to rewire your brain and improve your performance. When you say, "I am capable," or "I have the strength to face this challenge," you are not just offering empty encouragement. You are reminding your brain of its resilience and your ability to adapt and overcome. Over time, these affirmations begin to replace the critical voices in your head that say, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never succeed." Instead, you replace them with empowering truths that move you toward your goals. The power of affirmations is not limited to big, sweeping changes. They can be simple, small shifts that add up over time. "I am learning" is a powerful affirmation. It reminds you that mistakes are not failures, but stepping stones to success. "I am worthy of success" shifts your mindset from self-sabotage to self-empowerment. Repeating these affirmations daily, whether in the mirror or during a quiet moment before bed, rewires your neural pathways, gradually reinforcing a positive and confident self-image. I've experienced this transformation firsthand. There was a time when I doubted my abilities. Every new task, every new opportunity was met with fear of failure. I would rehearse potential mistakes in my mind and brace myself for the worst. It wasn't until I started consciously changing the way I talked to myself, replacing self-criticism with self-compassion, that I began to see improvement. Instead of thinking, "I'm not good enough to lead this project," I began to think, "I may not know everything, but I'm capable of learning and leading." The change wasn't immediate, but it was real. Over time, I began to approach challenges with greater confidence and found that my ability to problem solve and connect with others had grown exponentially. This shift in self-communication is foundational to personal success. The words you say to yourself shape how you perceive challenges. When you approach difficult situations with a mindset of, "I can handle this," instead of, "This is too hard," you activate a different part of your brain, the part that is solution-focused and resilient. You move from being a passive observer of life to an active participant, ready to take on the challenges before you. This principle applies not just to professional pursuits, but to personal relationships as well. How you speak to yourself influences how you interact with others. If you are kind and understanding toward yourself, you are more likely to extend that same kindness to those around you. Conversely, if your internal dialogue is harsh or unforgiving, you may struggle to offer that same compassion to others. For example, if you find yourself saying, "I'm not good enough," in the context of a relationship, it may lead you to doubt your worth in the eyes of others, creating unnecessary insecurity. But if you remind yourself, "I am worthy of love and respect," you can engage in relationships with confidence and authenticity. Building this self-communication requires reflection and effort. Take a moment each day to assess your inner dialogue. Are you using empowering language, or are you sabotaging yourself with limiting beliefs? Pay attention to those small moments when you feel doubt or fear. And in those moments, consciously shift your language. It may feel awkward at first, but over time, it will become second nature. Your brain will start to internalize the message that you are capable, worthy, and resilient. However, personal growth through communication is not only about affirmations and self-talk. It's also about setting boundaries, practicing self-care, and giving yourself permission to grow at your own pace. Communication is not just about what you say to others. It's about what you allow yourself to believe and accept. Often, we are so focused on meeting the expectations of others that we forget to honor our own needs and limits. Setting boundaries is one of the most powerful forms of communication you can practice for yourself. It's easy to feel like you have to say yes to everything, especially when you want to please others or avoid conflict. But when you fail to set boundaries, you open the door to burnout, resentment, and frustration. The key is learning to say no when you need to, not as an act of rejection, but as an act of self-preservation. I recall a period in my life when I struggled with saying no. I was constantly overcommitting myself to projects, social obligations, and other people's needs. This left me drained and overwhelmed, unable to fully show up for myself or others. It wasn't until I started setting boundaries, saying no to things that didn't align with my values or priorities, that I regained my energy and sense of self. It wasn't easy at first, but over time, I began to feel empowered by the choice to prioritize my well-being. This lesson of boundaries is crucial for personal growth. You must communicate with yourself first, recognizing your limits and respecting them, whether it's setting aside time for rest, saying no to an extra task, or simply taking a break when you need it. Honoring your boundaries reinforces your worth and your capacity for growth. Personal growth is a journey, and communication is the thread that ties it all together. When you communicate clearly with yourself, when you speak words of encouragement instead of doubt, and when you set boundaries to protect your well-being, you build a foundation of self-respect and self-love. From that place, everything else, relationships, career, health, flows more smoothly. So today, ask yourself, what message am I sending myself? Is it one of self-compassion and empowerment, or is it one of limitation and fear? And in the coming days, pay attention to the words you use, both internally and externally. Every word is a building block for your future. Every affirmation, every boundary, every kind thought is an investment in the person you are becoming. You have the power to shape that future with the words you speak to yourself today.